The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I didn't do the story on the regular show because it's like every 2 months that this is happening now, and it's a complete political ploy. And it's that once again, Donald Trump is threatening a government shutdown. Republicans don't want it for the most part. And yet again, we find ourselves in this situation. And it's almost become like debt and deficit, where it's now just a political football. Trump says he'd consider shutting down the government if he can't get funding for the wall. Then you had Paul Ryan say, I don't want to shut down government. And we already got some funding for the wall, and we're already starting to build the wall. And it is becoming one of these things that is hugely damaging to a lot of people. I don't pretend like it doesn't matter. I know that X% of government keeps functioning even during a shutdown. I get that.
Yeah.
But it's still not good. It's still yet another one of these things. Well, if it's shut down, why do our lawmakers still get paid? And it's become a disgusting political football.
Yeah, it's happening like every 6 months now. But
Yeah.
usually you'll see that the party that forces the shutdown, they'll just blame the other party for
Right.
the shutdown. It looks like Trump is actually taking ownership and that he wants this. I'm sure it would reflect poorly on him and on Republicans, but
Yes
he doesn't
and
seem
no.
to care about that.
Yes and no, because he did. So listen to the language Trump used. He tweeted, I would be willing to shut down government. So that's
Yeah.
so Trump would shut it down if the Democrats don't give us the votes for border security, which includes the wall. So that's a framing where he's been pushed by the Dems to have to shut it down, and he would still try to blame Democrats. I think the reason you're seeing more caution from just about every Republican who's been interviewed about it is that the Republicans are increasingly realizing that when you control the House, Senate, and White House, you can try to blame Democrats, but it's much more difficult. They've got an election coming up, and it might not be good for them.
Yeah, and for them, the issues of immigration and whether a wall gets built are less important, right? It's really Trump who stands to lose if that wall doesn't get built by 2020.
Sure.
And, he has to make immigration an issue. But the thing is that wall funding has been there for a little bit now because that was part of a negotiation with Democrats over, I think it was the Children's Health Program.
Yeah, because
Yep.
obviously building a wall is obviously would be part of negotiating children's health care. The two things go together like
Bacon and eggs.
like bacon and eggs, as I've read on the internet. I don't know anything about that myself. So will the government shutdown happen? I think it's not even an interesting conversation to have at this point. It might not. It'll probably go on 7 to 10 days. If it does happen, as usual, some government functions won't be happening. Most of them will, and it'll become 24-hour news for the first day or two. And then it's like, oh yeah, the government's still shut down, but people aren't really noticing. But Trump is using it to try to criticize Democrats. The people really are sick of this. I hate to take these nonpartisan. You know how the people like to say, the American people are sick and tired of partisan politics. Like, they don't make a critique of anyone in particular. It's like everybody's to blame.
Everyone hates corruption.
Everybody hates corruption. I don't do that stuff. Like, I blame the people that deserve blame. This is one of those cases where I really do think everybody's just sick of this government shutdown stuff.
I'm being pragmatic, though. I see a solution here. It's for the new Mexican president to stand up and say that we're going to pay for the wall.
Yeah.
And then Mexico will pay for it. No government shutdown necessary.
Government stays open. Doesn't cost the American people money. Of course, just never going to happen, right? This story went viral about I guess we would call him a panhandler in a sense. He's really more of like a sign holder. David Cazares was holding a sign, rather than asking for money, holding a sign out at an intersection saying, homeless, hungry for success, take a resume. And he was handing resumes out dressed in I guess what looked like a shirt and tie from the picture I saw, although the picture I saw, he's kind of blocking his shirt with his sign. And he ended up getting a ton of job offers. And of course, a lot of those offers came not from the actual resumes he handed out to people, but because the story went viral that this was a guy panhandling, but instead of asking for money, he was handing out resumes and asking for a job. Great idea. Wonderful that he did this. It seems like he'll have a job soon. I think that the thing that concerns me about it is the pull yourself up by your bootstraps types will see this and they'll say, listen, if you want to get a job, you just do what David Cazares did, right? You just get a sign, you get 100 copies of your resume, you hand them out, and next thing you know, you'll get a job. Not everybody is in the same situation as David Cazares. So I just think I would be worried that it would become like anybody who doesn't get a job and is actually panhandling for money clearly is doing it because they're lazy, because David Cazares was able to do this and get a job.
Yeah, and he also does have a pretty extensive history of employment, too.
Consistent
so he has
employment.
that resume.
Yes.
I agree with that. I think a lot of Republicans will use this as an example to kind of demonize those who are just panhandling and homeless and not trying to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I just don't think it'll work in every case, because if everyone's handing out resumes, then national story doesn't derive from that, right? No one's going to pay attention to every single one of those cases. It's only when it happened once that it creates a story.
The other thing is, and this goes directly counter to the story about just how great the economy is and how low unemployment is, by definition, when unemployment is low, there are very often fewer jobs available, right? Because jobs have been filled. And unless you have low unemployment combined with an explosively growing economy that's generating completely new jobs, and you have to account for retirement rates and all this other stuff, there are economic situations where, because the economy is good, there aren't that many jobs available, which would make it so that it would be tougher for people to find jobs and you'd see more people panhandling. Just one example of how a lot of these narratives crafted by the pull yourself by the bootstraps right are kind of internally in conflict with each other, if that makes sense.
I mean, would you recommend that other people in his position do the same thing, or do you think it's just going to work for him and him alone?
It would work for more than just him. It wouldn't work for everybody, as we're pointing out, but it's not a bad strategy, and it did get some attention. If it became the norm in the United States that when you want to get a job, instead of signing up on LinkedIn and Monster.com, you print resumes and stand on a busy street corner. If that became the norm, then the individual stories would get less attention, as you're
it's
pointing
thinking
out.
outside of the box.
Yeah.
I think that's always a good thing.
No doubt. Let's talk a little bit about, what are we talking about next? Okay, so we finished that story. So Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan, who is in the middle of, would we call it a sexual assault controversy?
Cover-up. I think you have
cover-up
to include
potential.
in there. Yeah.
He's accused of, when he was a wrestling coach, of looking the other way about sexual assault that was taking place. As of now, even though we're bracing for it, as of now, he still hasn't been accused of any sexual assault, right?
No, and I don't anticipate that he will get accused.
You don't?
No, I think it just has to do with the fact, it's becoming more and more clear that he did know that this doctor of the team
Was doing it.
and that he did nothing to stop it, because comments were attributed to him where he said, if this doctor tries anything on me, I'm going to knock him out, right? And that implies that he knew something about it.
Yes, unless he meant something else by "try this on me," like some kind of new ice pack or something.
Or he just
like
randomly mentioned that, this
It would
guy
be
could
weird.
be a pedophile, or it could be someone who sexually assaults people.
It's as believable that Jim Jordan didn't know what was going on as it is that Donald Trump didn't know about the Trump Tower meeting ahead of time, right? They both knew what was going on. So now he's running for Speaker of the House. Paul Ryan, as I told you, is going to be leaving Congress. He's no longer going to be Speaker of the House. So that position is up for a new candidate. McCarthy, what's the guy's name?
Kevin McCarthy.
Kevin McCarthy is considered a top candidate for it. There are others vying for the position, but Jim Jordan also is. Interesting CNN piece seeks to explain why Jim Jordan is doing this, and it lists ambition, number one, name clearing, number two, the idea that if he becomes Speaker of the House, then he would be cleared because they're not going to make Speaker of the House a guy who did something wrong. Number three would be leverage, which is that by virtue of being Speaker of the House, he could prevent repercussions against himself if the entire looking the other way about the sexual assault thing escalates. I think that those are all three pretty good reasons, although I think the timing of it suggests that ambition is relatively low on the list. I think it's both trying to clear his name by getting a promotion and also having leverage and a way of preventing investigations into him.
Yeah, and this is even if Republicans are able to retain the House of Representatives after the midterms. And who knows right now, it could be 50-50. Maybe the Democrats will take over and they'll put Pelosi or someone else in.
Yep.
And if they do keep the House, if Republicans maintain the House and they pick Jim Jordan in there, it would be a real win for the Freedom Caucus, too.
Yes,
because
the extreme Freedom Caucus.
Yeah, they'll just put some establishment Republican in at the levels of leadership, and then the person running for House Speaker from the Freedom Caucus will get 10, 20% of the vote. If he pulls that off, that would be really telling, and we would be in a bad spot, I think.
It would be really bad if Democrats don't take over the House or Senate. It would be even worse if Republicans maintain it and Jim Jordan were to become the Speaker of the House.
You think he'd put on a suit coat if he was Speaker of the House? You ever
Is that
see him
his
in
thing?
interviews?
He always has.
He just goes with the shirt and tie on camera. Farron Cousins pointed that out last week. I didn't notice it until then.
Yeah.
It bothers me.
So he's kind of known for the tough questioning during congressional hearings, right? Is that his shtick?
That's his thing.
I don't know that the questions are that good. Like, he talks quickly, and the demeanor, it's kind of like the Ben Shapiro effect, where Ben
Right.
Shapiro, often it's the delivery that feels very powerful and strong, but what he's saying doesn't really make that much sense. I feel like it's similar with Jim Jordan.
It's like a rapid-fire prosecutorial type,
Yeah.
right? One of those lawyers.
But not quite as good at it as Trey Gowdy. Trey Gowdy is totally whacked, but he is pretty good at that.
And Trey Gowdy's also leaving,
He's
too,
also
so
leaving,
that
yeah.
leaves Jim Jordan. I mean,
He's gonna be the
any
guy.
other candidates? Do you think if the Republicans keep the House that they'll pick someone else besides Jim Jordan?
Well, I mean, isn't McCarthy
there's
seems
Kevin
to be
McCarthy.
the top guy.
Yeah, the problem with him is the last time the House Speaker job was open, when John Boehner left, he admitted that the Benghazi hearings were an attempt to sabotage Hillary Clinton's campaign. And
That's
he's also,
not going to be seen too kindly by the extreme Republicans.
Yeah, and he's also not very good at speaking.
No, he's not.
He kind of like, mumbles and is not that effective at it. So
Right.
you don't really want a House Speaker doing that.
If the job has the word speaker in the title, you've got to be able to speak really, really well.
I think it's Steve Scalise because he's already the whip
He already has a story.
and he was shot
Yeah.
a year ago, and that will, get some sympathy for his case.
That's not bad. Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. Let's hope it's not Jim Jordan. For the betterment of the country and common sense and logic to win out, let's hope that it is not Jim Jordan.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.